summertime for us is actually not really, it doesn't get any easier or any less. We just kind of change what we do. So, you know, if you guys had a chance to watch the halaqa, or sorry, the khutbah from yesterday, you'll get a sense of kind of like the things that we occupy ourselves with all the time. If you haven't watched it yet, I really encourage you to do that because it was powerful. Khutbah, I think it was one of the best. I mean, for me personally, like, you know, there was a seriousness about it that kind of helped put everything into perspective. And so, you know, this is kind of what we occupy ourselves with during the summertime, because, you know, we still, like, are kind of wading and swimming in pools of darkness a lot of the time. We actually don't go on vacation. That vacation is not really part of our vocabulary. And I think we would be really bad people on vacation when we wouldn't really quite know what to do with ourselves. We'd probably just like sit somewhere with our computers and our phones and like look back on YouTube and checking out what's happening in the Arab news and all of that. I'm a news junkie and I like kind of can't pull myself away from that. But so, you know, there's so much going on in the world that we also have to be careful because, you know, everyone, if you watch the headlines, if you know what's happening in the world, it's very easy to get depressed and very easy to get sucked into the darkness. And so we have to make a very concerted effort to balance out that darkness with light and escape and, you know, take those moments. And our vacations are usually like movies. You know, we run to the movies regularly. We run to the bookstores. You know, we just, it's something to just kind of get an escape. We watch kind of stupid shows on TV. I love Gordon Ramsay, so, you know, I like seeing people, like him call people idiots when they're cooking. It's kind of very, you know, like, refreshing. So anyway, so these kinds of things. And, you know, and I always have to get, you know, because I'm really into watching sort of the political headlines too, I love getting political satire. So every morning I have to watch either Stephen Colbert or I have to watch Seth Meyers. And this is the only way that I can actually hear the news. It has to be filtered through comedy for me to really be able to kind of tolerate it and deal with it. So comedy is actually a really wonderful thing. And we started also recently, you know, watching comedies, and in particular stand-up comedy. So I discovered, I mean, I always knew Dave Chappelle, but I never actually watched some of his shows. And he is brilliant, and he's so funny. And, you know, I think most people know he's Muslim. But you wouldn't necessarily know that by the kinds of things he talks about. But, you know, it's like you have to appreciate his craft because he is just on point, he's funny, he's just, you know, he's amazing. And you learn things when you're listening to him. You know, we also watched, of course, Hassan Minhaj, who's great. You know, so if you guys haven't seen any of these shows on Netflix, you know, he has a wonderful award-winning show called Homecoming King, which was awesome. And yes, we also watched Rami Youssef, which I know is like sparking a lot of conversations around the world. But I think, you know, I really respect him, and you know, he's drawing attention, even though he talks about a lot of controversial topics. You know, we watched his new Netflix HBO show the other night called Feeling, and that was also, you know, really good. So I would highly recommend that. So so what could be better? I came across. I was really excited to learn that here in Southern California, coming up in a few weeks, is a show featuring Muslim female comedians. I was like, oh yes, there's like 8 Muslim comics or comedians. I don't know how you refer to comedians in the female version. But you know, there was an advertising going around on Facebook, and I was like, oh, this is great. And it's supposed to take place in Huntington Beach. It's a little bit far. And I was like, oh man, you know, it's on Sunday, July 21st. We actually have like a Usuli event here. We were going to do a brainstorming here around the same time. And I thought, you know, maybe I should talk to everybody and see if we can adjust the time. Maybe we all take like you know, a trip down there because, you know, they're Muslim comics and we should support them. And, you know, this is great. So I was like, okay, thinking about it. And I, you know, invited people on Facebook. But then I was like, okay, no, you know what? I can't wait. I have to know, like, who are these women and what is their comedy like? And I was just excited, you know? So I looked at a list of 8 names, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start looking them up on YouTube. I'm going to watch some of their videos and see what they're about. So the first one, I kind of looked at everybody's picture, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Okay, and there's one woman that's a hijabi. I'm like, okay, I'll start with her. You know, she looks kind of funny. And so she was giving a talk, or she was invited to a club somewhere here in Los Angeles, and she, I think it's a club that is, you know, started for artists and for comedians and for like spoken word art and that kind of thing. And the 2 women who organize it are lesbians, and so I think that she was speaking to a lesbian audience. So I turned it on, and you know, the music starts, and she's kind of like coming in like this and doing her little dance. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I want to read to you the first things that she said. So she's covered, you know, and she's a big woman. So, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's just a fact. She's a big woman and she has big bosoms, but she's covered, you know? And so she says, so hey, you know, she's like ambling in. Hey guys, I didn't wear a bra here just for you guys, so I can shake it a little more. Okay, you guys are effing gorgeous people. Look at you guys. You are gonna make me turn bi today. I was like, what? Oh my God. Okay, this is an 8-minute video on YouTube. So I was like, okay, you know, and she like literally is dropping F-bombs and, you know, SHIT bombs and, you know, poop bombs. And you have to know something about me. I'm like, I hate bad language. I hate foul language. And I'm known in our house as like the head of the polite police. I do not let, you know, like my son say even like the word damn. Like when he says damn, I'm like, where are the beavers? I don't see any beavers. Okay? So he knows that this is a joke. So, you know, just to kind of get through this, let's just say, you know, when I say F that, whatever, let's just call it fry that shrimp, okay? Because there was a lot of shrimp being fried that night. So she was like, you know, fry that shrimp, blah, blah, blah. She starts talking, and, you know, I want to just, you know, I don't want to misrepresent like what she said. And I wanted to also get your reaction because I'm like, okay, maybe it's me. So she goes on and she says, she starts out and she says, I just want to get something off my chest. First of all, you know, I go over to my mom's house, and every time I go to my mom's house, she brings her friend over and she pulls out my wedding albums. And, you know, and she's a big woman. She's like, okay, and I have to say that, you know, I'm a Muslim woman and I'm big, and I blame Cinnabon because I used to be, you know, different, and Cinnabon turned me into a size 16. She's wearing, you know, a big thing. And then she goes on and she, like, you know, talks about how her mom and her mom's friend sit there and look at the wedding albums and look at her and look at the wedding albums and look at her, and she's like, you know, like, I used to be queen bee and now they treat me like an Oompa Loompa. And then, you know, it's kind of like a little bit uncomfortable. And then she goes, but I just want to say, I love my body, my husband loves my body, and we should all love our bodies. It's like, okay, fine. Then she goes on, she goes, well, okay, so I'm Muslim, and I just have to say, you know, I check off all the boxes of things I need to do to get to paradise. I pray, I fast, I wear my scarf. And, you know, and then she starts mocking that, and she goes, so, you know, but I have to say, I'm sure all of you all have had the same feeling. 10% of you, even the atheists, probably think, did I choose the right religion? Like, oh my God, okay. Then she goes on and she starts talking about her mom. She goes, you know, my mom is, you know, she has come up with this new way to elevate her holiness with God. And I gotta tell you, this is like the weirdest stuff, and I can't make this frying shrimp stuff up, okay? She washes dead bodies. And let me tell you, like, when did God stop accepting money as, you know, a donation? So, you know, the people in the audience are obviously not Muslim. They're laughing, you know, and she's trying to, like, you know, drop enough F-bombs to get people to laugh, and goes on from there. And I just have to say, you know, so I'm watching this and I'm getting upset. And for me, you know, just to kind of like tell a side story, when the professor and I first came here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get upset because this is like really upsetting for me, and it goes on from here. So when we first arrived here in Los Angeles, you know, we went to the Islamic Center of Southern California. We met Mrs. Alfie, who is like the, you know, she had funded a chair for the professor. Anyway, you know, we were getting to know, I was getting to know the community. This was my first, like, introduction. And I was, you know, at that time, reading a lot of books still. And one of my favorite books was Al-Ghazali's, it was translated, The Remembrance of Death and Dying. And, you know, so this book is kind of like, hey, you know, you have to remember that all of us are going to die. And we have to do what we need to do to prepare for that. Because it's kind of like, if you know a final exam is coming, and you would be very unwise not to prepare for that. And all of us are going to, you know, reach that final exam. Whether it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be, you know, 50 years from now. But we know it's coming, and there's no way to get out of it. So it's a really important thing to sort of remind yourself of this and put your life into perspective. So, kind of interesting stories, like people would be like digging graves and like laying down in them to remind themselves, okay, in the end of times I'm going to be here, whatever. So I kind of thought to myself, I was really wanting to be, like focused on how to develop my relationship with God. So I thought to myself, what, I kind of want, I told Mrs. Alfie, I'm like, what, do you guys do burials here? I actually would really like to wash bodies. And I said that really seriously, because I wanted to remind myself, like, this is where we all end up. And she looked at me with a little bit of horror, and she was like, no, you're young. You don't want to do that. She really, like, pushed me aside from that. So for me, like, this whole idea of washing bodies has, like, a really sacred element to it. So, hearing that was kind of like, oh my God, okay, fine. But so it's like, you're wearing a hijab, you're dropping F-bombs left and right, you are talking about filthy things. Okay, maybe this is just a one-off. I watched the whole thing, turned it off. I'm like, okay, let's work our way down the list. So there are 8 Muslim women. Maybe she was just like, an aberration. So I go to the next one. Again, F-bombs, S-bombs, lots of frying shrimp. We have to talk about sex, we have to talk about vaginas, we have to talk about blowjobs, we have to talk about drinking and drugs and white boyfriends, because most of these people are like brown skin. And, they have to talk about, making fun of their immigrant parents and, talking about shocking images and being proud to drink and not pray and eat pork. And, and it's like, they all begin with I'm Muslim, I'm Muslim, I'm Muslim. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, basically, like, so I could give you more examples, but it's just, it's like very, very upsetting. So, I'm thinking to myself, in what way are you Muslim? It's like, they basically, all of them go to a place where they are making fun of Islam, making fun of Muslims, making fun of Muslim men. Oh, you can't go out with Arab men. White men are so much better, because you can go crazy and they'll buy you flowers, but with white men, they'll tell you that that's haram. Or that, one woman had like a scarf and she had an injury on her neck. So the first thing is, oh, I know what you're thinking, blowjob. I'm like, oh God, no, I'm not thinking blowjob. And of course the typical stuff about terrorists and, women walking 10 steps behind men and all of this sort of stuff. So the net of it is like, basically Islamophobia is correct, right? Islam has absolutely nothing to offer humanity. And, it's misogynistic, it's backwards, it's foreign, But these women are the ones that are, like, telling us about it and making people laugh for a cheap joke. They basically throw Islam under the bus. So I watched all 8 of them. And I have to say, like, definitely they were at different levels of skill. And the ones that were not as good, you can literally tell within the first few minutes, like, where the person is, how they are. And I have to say, if they were more skilled, I watched more of them. Some of them were so painful, I literally could not watch more than a minute or two, and I skipped through, and I just had to shut it off. The woman who, there were 2 women who I think were the most skilled, because their wit was sharp. They had more complex ideas. It wasn't like the low-hanging fruit of just like the disgusting slurs against Islam. One of them is actually, has her own like podcast. She's half of the team of Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. She's the bad Muslim. And she very proudly says, I'm the bad Muslim. I'm the one who doesn't pray, I eat pork, and I drink. And she does this whole segment, she's Persian, and she like does this whole sort of show about remembering when she was 11 years old and going to, her Muslim, Sunday school class or whatever, and her interactions with her teacher and how her teacher is telling her about how she can earn heaven points and hell points. And, it's like, okay, it's one thing if you talk about these things and you joke about them, and you come back and you, like, redeem Islam, or so it's kind of like, yes, here's your perception, but here's the reality. And there was, here's the possibility, here's the possible misunderstanding that took place here. None of that happened. And so, sadly, the most skilled person is sort of the most advanced in terms of her career. The second one, who was also really good, I mean, who was good, more good, I guess, more articulate, you know, had more complex ideas, again, had to go and talk about private parts, you know, and had to talk about, you know, boyfriends, all with, you know, frying shrimp in the meantime. So I was so upset. It was awesome. It was like Thursday, and I just shut it down, and I was like, okay, I can't handle this. I walked down the hall to check on the professor, and he is waiting in his pools of darkness, you know, preparing for the Friday khutbah, okay? And when I walk into his den, like, his back is to me, and so I'm like, you know, upset. I open the door. He doesn't even look at me. He's like, what's wrong? Okay? This is the benefit of like living with someone that you cannot hide anything from. Like, literally, you can read my aura from like 50 miles away. It's like, okay, what's wrong? Tell me. And I didn't even know that I was like that upset. And I'm just like spewing. I'm just like, you know, emitting just like, I don't know what. I'm sure my aura was like bright red or something, you know? So I'm like, it took me a second. I'm like, why am I so upset? I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know. And normally I try to keep my upsets to myself because he's got enough dark pools, and you know. But I couldn't contain myself. I'm like, I cannot believe. You would not believe. I'm watching these Muslim female comedians, and I just like let it all out. I just vomited it all over the professor. And then I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I feel really bad because, you know, he didn't need another pool of vomit to deal with. So I go and I'm like, okay, I have to pray. I just have to pray. So I go and to the living room. And I put my head down and I pray, and you guys, I cried. I cried so hard. And I can't even, you know, it's just like, I don't know where it came from. It just like, I just poured out of me. And part of it is because, you know, I get so upset, like, I chose this faith. I chose this faith, and every morning I wake up, every day. You know, we just jump in these pools. It's okay. We jump in these pools of darkness trying to figure out how do we bring light. You know, and it's a choice, and it's an honorable, I love being Muslim. I'm so proud to be Muslim because I know what's in this tradition. And these women inherited it and didn't even bother, and they like just throw it under the bus for a cheap laugh. And I just, you know, like all 8 of them. They were chosen. Sorry?
They were chosen.
I don't know how they came together. I have no idea how this particular group of people came together. Okay, I can say, I've talked about the fitna page on Facebook before. That's where I found it. Okay, so I'm sorry. I have a lot of run-ins with the fitna people. They create fitna in me. So, but anyway, anyway, okay. So I was like, all right, let me just calm down and let me just try and think about this. Because, you know, okay, they are children of immigrants. I'm a child of immigrants, so I totally get it. I know what it feels like to grow up. You're embarrassed about your parents, you're embarrassed about your culture, you know, your parents don't speak your language, they don't know the challenges you're dealing with, you know, it's like very uncomfortable, you know. And for so many of my years, until I became interested in Islam, I hated being Chinese. I hated being Chinese, and you know, my mom was the same way too. And I'll just tell you a funny story. I was like remembering this morning. You know, I was younger than Nito. I was probably like 7 or 8 or something. And my parents, you know, I mean, typical, I'm sure you have these experiences too. People come from overseas, and it's like, why do they have to stay at our house? You know, and it's like so irritating. And, you know, so anyway, this is a separate story. So my parents were in imports and exports, you know, as part of their like transition, you know, and assimilation into America. And so there was a guy that they were dealing with and doing business. And so, you know, I'm young, I don't know what's going on, but all I know is his name is Captain Ye, okay? I mean, that's literally his name, and it's funny because I'm in my 50s and I still remember this to this day. So for some reason, Captain Ye really wanted to talk to my mom. My dad was out of town, he's the normal contact, but my mom like didn't want to deal with him, and she told me, okay, you know, Captain Ye, I really don't want to talk to him. So Captain Ye came and rang our doorbell. And I was like, okay, just pretend that we're not here, okay? And he's gonna go away. So I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting quietly in the living room, and we're like waiting for him to go away. And the doorbell rings, and the doorbell rings, and the doorbell rings. And then pretty soon we hear like our side gate, like opening, you know, like from the front to go to the backyard. And he has let himself into the backyard to come look in our windows because he's convinced that we're home. My mom's like, okay, hide under the living room table. So I'm like, oh my God. So I hid under the living room table, and my mom hid behind the sofa. And we like waited there until he left, and he looked through every single window. Okay, this is my association with dealing with Chinese people, okay? So I didn't want any part of that. And so, you know, I went to Berkeley, which is like, you know, tons of Asian people. I like just avoided Asian people like the plague. And then, you know, I had my own experiences with racism, but I didn't, you know, I'm sort of embarrassed to say this, like my experiences with racism weren't challenging like African Americans, you know, who get shot, or, you know, Muslims who get killed. I had the thing where people looked at me and they were like, oh, she's a pretty Asian woman, you know, and it was like creepy white men that would come up to me with whatever perceptions they had of pretty Asian women and try to like make conversation with me. And I would find that extremely irritating, again, because it's like, okay, you know nothing about me, you're like a stranger, and you just want to talk to me because you like the way I look. So it just kind of reinforced this idea of like, okay, I don't like that. So it wasn't, ironically, until I started becoming interested in Islam and reading about equality and people and just learning the beautiful traditions that I thought, you know what, I'm being racist and I'm being unfair, and I should like try and see, you know, Chinese people maybe aren't that bad. So I remember this was before I became Muslim, but I had already started reading about Islam, and I had not met the professor, obviously. And so through some family friends, I met, you know, a whole group of like Taiwanese young people. They were in my age, and they were doing, you know, the same thing as I was. They were working in jobs and trying to get ahead, and I was like, okay, great. So I went out with my friend, and we met all these Taiwanese people. They all look like me, so I feel comfortable, you know. It's like, okay, I feel like I'm home, you know. And they were really nice, and then they started talking about, you know, jobs and whatever. Then they start talking about, well, what kind of food do we eat? What does your mom cook for you? And then you roll into the complaints about, you know, oh, your parents are so this, and your relatives are so that, and I'm like, oh my God, I am back in my relative's house, and I'm just listening to people, you know, it's just the kids of the people that I tried to avoid, and I'm like, okay, I'm not really interested in gossiping about Taiwanese families. So I'm like, okay, I'm interested in talking about things like the meaning of life, God, what happens to you after you die. Okay, let me try and introduce this into the conversation. So I did that. I'm like, oh, you know, what do you think the meaning of life is when you think happens after you die? Nobody cares. Nobody, they're looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with you? And I'm like, okay, this is not home for me. This is why I am searching. So, but it took Islam to break me out of this, you know, immigrant child mindset. And it would be something if I would be like, I become a stand-up comedian and I just like throw the whole, you know, Chinese population under the bus, but it's not the same because we're talking about religion. We're not talking about an ethnicity. And that's what I felt with these women, is that a lot of them hated themselves. They hated their parents and they hated themselves. And they took it out through their comedy against Islam because they conflated culture and they conflated religion. And then they, you know, reduced themselves to the typical things that they felt their audience would you know, be affected by. And this is a problem because, you know, when you go to a comedy club, right, you're in a good mood, you're open, you're ready to laugh, you know, you're happy. And many of these people probably have never met Muslims before. This is an opportunity, you know, and it's like this is an opportunity to say something beautiful, but they had nothing beautiful to offer because they had nothing beautiful inside them in terms of their own understanding of this religion. So I calmed down a little bit and I thought, okay, I understand, but I still completely don't agree with this. Many of them know the situation for Muslims now. They know people who are persecuted because they even say it in their own monologues. They say, yeah, it's a hard time being Muslim. Yeah, Muslim, blah, blah, blah. So they know. And they know that when they put themselves out in front of an audience, you, whether you like it or not, you are representing your faith, especially when you start by saying, I'm Muslim, okay? In what way are you Muslim? Don't say you're Muslim. Say you're Pakistani. Say you're Persian. Say you're Egyptian. Say you're wherever you came from, because that is your ethnicity. And I am fine. I can laugh at jokes about Pakistani parents. I can laugh at jokes about Chinese parents. I can laugh, you know, at jokes about whatever, but do not conflate Islam with whatever ethnicity you come from. But I don't, you know, I don't know if maybe they haven't even thought of that because they haven't even taken the time to recognize that there is a difference between ethnicity and religion. But
when you take an opportunity like that, you know, art, comedy, this is a tool. This is a powerful tool in our day and age. Yesterday, the professor was talking in the khutbah about how we live in a time where everyone speaks and no one listens. And it's hard to break through. But comedy is one of those things that does break through. And it requires intelligence, articulation, it requires hard work. And it, you know, like, I think of people like Ellen DeGeneres, who I love. She's a comedian. She's not Muslim, obviously. Ellen DeGeneres, you know, she has one of the most popular comedic shows on TV, but she started out as a stand-up comic. And, you know, to date myself and her, I actually saw her in person in high school when she was still starting out as a stand-up comic. And she was brilliant, and she still is. But she never reduces herself to bad language. She never reduces herself to, you know, cheap jokes about sexuality or about touching body parts or blowjobs or any of those kinds of things. And she made it. You know, that was back in a time when there were even fewer women in comedy. And I know women struggle with comedy. You know, I know that it's a male-dominated industry, and I know that there's a lot you have to do to fit in. But you know what? If you are full of confidence and beauty and light, you can go into that and shine your light instead of going there as an empty vessel and sucking in all the disgusting stuff that's already there and trying to fit in. And I know because I came to Islam because I was running away from all of that filth. The talk about the sex, the talk about the body parts, the blowjobs, the whatever. You know, this is what attracted me to Islam. And I would be really remiss to say that there aren't female Muslim comedians that are doing a good job, that don't, you know, throw Islam under the bus. One of them is Noor Al-Hadid, and you can look these people up online. You can look up this show online. You can find the names online of the people I'm talking about. You can go watch the videos yourself. You know, I don't mean, and I know maybe if someone from Fitna is watching me, it's like they think that I have a thing about Fitna. But, you know, the truth is the truth, people. It's like, you know, you can watch and judge for yourself. And from my vantage point, where I believe with my whole heart that Islam is beautiful and has something beautiful to offer people, that you can do much better. And you start by learning what is in this faith. I also been watching podcasts, just to give you another example from the realm of artistry, because I do consider like comedy as, you know, within that realm. There's a really great podcast, I'm hoping that actually they'll interview the professor, called Diffused Congruence. Okay, there are not many Muslim podcasts out there that I think are worth listening to. And I've been searching because I'm trying to figure out who's out there, who's it worth listening to. And these guys have been around for a long time, and they've interviewed a lot of really interesting people. But so recently, I think just like last week, they had put out a podcast where they interviewed Amir Suleiman, who is a famous poet, a Muslim poet. And I had never been really, I mean, I'd heard of him because Sharif is really into like spoken word and hip hop and all of that kind of stuff, but I didn't really know anything about it. And this is why it's actually also these podcasts are really valuable, because they interview a lot of like Muslim people who you might not have really known their backstory or anything. And as you learn from what they've experienced, it's actually really, it's wonderful. So Amir Suleiman, and I really encourage you to listen to this, was talking about like, you know, poetry as an art form and just, you know, like the history of it. It's just really fascinating. But at the very end, he shared some of his spoken word poetry that he's working on. He's working on several different projects, and he merged some of the things. And it completely blew me away. I've never heard anything like this. It's like uplifting, it's cool, it's like spiritual, it's like soul moving. It's like, whoa, you listen to this and you're like, holy cow, I need to know more. And it's beautiful, it's divine. And so I was like, okay, here's an example. I know Mona Haidar, I believe, is very popular, and she's done a lot of very empowering music. I know it's controversial. I don't know a lot of it, to be fair, to be honest, but I know she's done a lot of good things, and I know that she works on things like abuse and, you know, empowerment, so it's not like throwing Islam under the bus. And of course, Baraka Blue, which we heard when, you know, we went to an event, and Baraka Blue, who's also a convert and a poet, was reading a lot of his poetry about the Prophet. And I heard him interviewed also on the same podcast on Diffused Congruence. And he himself has his own podcast called Path and Present. where he talks about like the spiritual path and that kind of thing. But his work was mind-blowing and beautiful. So I take as excuses that, you know, Muslim female comedians have no excuse. I'm sorry. You know, your Islam, as you're conveying through your craft, is not the same Islam that I follow and that I believe. My Islam is about beauty and justice and love and humanity. Your Islam is about ugliness, backwardness, misogyny, you know, everything that Islamophobes would love people to believe about Islam. And these women could make a lot of money. You know, they could end up on their payroll and, you know, but I just, you know, I don't know that anyone has, you know, I don't know that anyone has, you know, like, seen this or reacted to this in the same way, but I just felt I needed to share this with you because it was so upsetting and it's such a huge opportunity. Honestly, it made me feel like I want to go write, like, a comedic monologue just to prove you can do it. So maybe I'll do that for next time.
Yeah, do it.
But anyway, and also, you know, Ahmed, who's not here today, he's visiting his family. I know you're watching. I told him I want to write material for you too. But because, you know, it's like these are the things that, you know, we have to embrace the tools of our age. We have to be smart about how do we break through, how do we share something beautiful, you know, and like I said, like the two women, Noor al-Hadid and Yasmin al-Hadi, sorry I didn't say her name before, she was a former student of the professors at the law school, and she's doing comedy now, and you can find her, you know, on YouTube as well. You know, she doesn't do that, she's great, you know, so anyway, we have a long way to go, but, you know, and I wasn't trying to throw these women under the bus. They obviously, you know, have talent and you know, they have the bravery to get up and do that, but they need to feed their souls, they need to feed their intellects with beautiful Islam, which is very different from their ethnicity. So, that's it. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to say a couple of things, because in the break, there was a question, and I actually forgot to say this. I picked on Muslim women today, and I didn't pick on Muslim men. So I just wanted to say that, you know, everything that I said applies to both men and women, you know, comedians, obviously. And just to kind of put a finer point on it, you know, I mentioned that I really like Dave Chappelle, but Dave Chappelle actually doesn't identify as Muslim, occurred to me. So he is not out there representing himself as a Muslim. I mean, people know it and it's talked about, but, you know, so someone was asking, well, how do you feel about him and kind of all the bad words he uses and all the stuff that he does? And I think that he himself recognizes that that's really problematic for a Muslim audience, but he doesn't present himself that way. But, you know, the point I also want to just say is, you know, it's fine if you want to make fun of something that Muslims do. We all know that Muslims do things that are crazy and ridiculous and funny if you put them in their perspective. But I think what's really important is to leave them with something else, so that what you say can either mention that this is, you know, perhaps a misunderstanding, perhaps there's another way to, you know, look at this situation, that Islam is not, you know, something that's ugly, but there, you know, there's so much more to this picture. I mean, you just have to have something to balance that. And, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm going to embarrass you. We have someone here who actually wrote for the Rami show. And so, you know, I was like, oh, great. You know, but it doesn't change what I say. It doesn't change how I feel about it. But I'm actually really happy because, you know, I understand, you know, we cannot also be effective with these tools if we are not honest and if we don't talk about the issues that are confronting our youth. So we do have to talk about sex, we do have to talk about drugs, we do have to talk about dating, and all of these things that Muslim youth in particular are struggling with. But I believe they're looking for, you know, Islam. I mean, we know here that Islam has a lot of stuff to say about that, and stuff that's not just on the extreme and, you know, draconian, and it's like either you're this or you're not Muslim. I think that there's a lot of, you know, we try to at least talk about here, there's a lot of nuance, a lot of richness, sophistication, you know, a lot of room for discussion. And I think that's really important, that Muslims, you know, especially young Muslims, need to understand that Islam has something to offer them that's relevant to the challenges that they face now in this time, that can actually be very uplifting for them. And especially, you know, people who are really interested in social justice, you know, the professor has been talking recently in khutbahs about how Islam, more than any other religion, is built on a foundation of justice. And without justice, everything falls apart. And that's something to be very proud of. If you're a Muslim, you know, a youth that is fighting for social causes and you don't know that actually your religion, more than any other, demands justice. And that's actually really cool. So, and I think that that's an opportunity to build on, you know, the relevance of Islam in our time. So anyway, again, just to say, I didn't mean to just pick on women. It is men, and maybe, inshallah, you know, if I have a chance, I know there are a lot of really great men, you know, male comedians out there, and I don't know them, I haven't watched them. So, you know, maybe I'll watch and see if I have something to say next time, inshallah. Okay, that's it. Thank you.